Game of Thrones Season 8 is what many people, especially on Reddit, would like to consider controversial. And it is controversial. Any last season of any super popular show, and this includes things like Lost, have been under enormous scrutiny because, we all have expectations. We all want what we want out of, the show that we've invested years into. Game of Thrones is a little bit different, though, because Game of Thrones was, of course, based on George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, and therefore it had something that it was based on that people, were comparing it to and expecting it to live up to and etc. versus Lost, for example, which was an original television show just being written from the ground up. However, of course, George R. R. Martin never finished his Song of Ice and Fire. He still has two books left to write, and he's 70 years old, so, I'm hoping that eventually we'll get those books, and, hey, maybe in 10 years they'll remake a Game of Thrones. Who knows? And then maybe they'll actually call it Song of Ice and Fire. We shall see. For me, I was not as disappointed as I feel most people were about the final season of Game of Thrones. I certainly felt like the writing felt rushed. They were obviously trying to condense, everything that because George R. R. Martin had consulted them a few years ago on how the story would end and everything, but of course, since he hadn't finished his books, he wasn't even sure himself how the characters were going to get from A to B, So he probably was just like, yeah, Daenerys becomes evil and destroys King's Landing, and Bran becomes the king. Hooray, figure it out, And then they had to fill in all the blanks. And so that was the big switch, because after season 6, they kind of stretched books 4 and 5 to cover all of like 5 and 6, seasons 5 and 6. So basically and then they even had some filler in those seasons as well. But basically starting with season 7 especially, they were basically just going off of, just their own, out of their own mind. They're just making it up. That's what I'm trying to say. They're just making it up. There was nothing from the book starting in season 7. So I think when people say rushed or lazy or whatever, I think that the biggest thing is that, because if you're looking at Game of Thrones season 7 and 8 from a third person point of view, and if you've never saw the first 6 seasons, I think it looks like great television. Certainly the technical aspects, the cinematography, the special effects, everything is the best television's ever looked. And if you're coming in and you hadn't seen those first 6 seasons, you would say, this is fine. What's everyone's problem? But that's because you didn't see those first 6 seasons. So the biggest difference was that then Benioff and Weiss, and people are mad at them directly, but there's more people involved than them, but it was primarily them, and they were just trying to come up with their own story to get to the ending. And why am I saying all this? I'm not trying to justify how everything turned out. I'm just saying that that's how it was. They didn't get a whole lot of support from George R. R. Martin after he kind of left to continue working on the books, and they were on their own to figure out how they get to these crazy things that he told them the show ends. Of course, we still don't know to what degree he told them. I'm pretty sure that Daenerys becoming how she became that will play out in the books, but we'll have more time, more pages, more character development, and we'll get to see that turn more organically, I think. The writing can definitely be viewed as rushed and lazy, but I think it's just a matter of trying to puzzle together a puzzle that wasn't yours to begin with. Now I want to talk about this episode specifically, season 8, episode 6, the series finale, the final episode. I was gonna go on a huge hour-long tangent about pros and cons, but I figured you guys have probably watch a dozen other YouTube videos that kind of nitpick that to death, and then at that point it is just really my own personal opinion, and of course as I'm talking to you it all is my personal opinion, but I actually really liked the season finale. Now I understand if you didn't. I think most people who don't like this finale probably didn't like the 5th episode, the previous one with Daenerys' heel turn. And I even said in my review for that episode, like, that didn't bother me. I knew it was coming. You could see the wheels turning, especially from the beginning of this season. And again, I think it has always been what I mean, we'll see in the books, but I'm almost positive that George R. R. Martin will have Daenerys have a heel turn as well. It's just the way that it happened in the show that I think you shouldn't like. Not that it happened. You can be grumpy that Dany turned evil, but that was going to happen no matter what. What you should be upset about is that they didn't take extra care to get us there and make us feel like, oh, okay, this was, this is what's going on. I felt like that, but I kind of read in between the subtext on a lot of what like the writers are kind of shoehorning in or whatever. I mean, that's my writer brain, I guess, because I in my own past projects I shoe in a lot of like extra foreshadowing and whatever. Anyways, I'm not talking about me. So again, there are things that didn't bother me, but there are things that did bother me. I really hated the way, for example, that Cersei and Jaime went out. I thought that was dumb. I thought somebody should have killed her and Jaime should have stayed with Brienne of Tar. But we hardly ever get everything that we want, right? But again, besides that, I didn't really have a problem with that episode, other than the rushed writing. So if you can forgive, I know it's hard for some of you guys, if you can forgive the 5th episode of season 8 for all of its problems, then episode 6, the series finale, actually serves as a pretty good finale to where we are at this point. A lot of people can say, oh, maybe it's not the greatest finale that Game of Thrones deserved, and some people have argued that if when you started the show with season 1, it's like this ending doesn't really fit the tone or like the like the feel of how the show started. And again, maybe that's true because it was going off of just Benioff and Weiss's story and not George R. R. Martin's. Again, we don't know how much of his story ended up being in this finale, so I can understand that. But for what it was, I thought it wrapped up things pretty good. And again, I'm not really going to get into pros and cons, but I will say, like, just the way that they kind of came to the understanding. I was really afraid that they were just going to be like, democracy! Oh, why didn't we think of that before? And, some people have misinterpreted the ending to be that it's democracy. It's not. It's, they still have a king, and, I mean, the democracy-ish thing that they have about it is that, after the king dies, or actually they didn't really specify if the king gets to live out as king or if they like decide every 10 years. They didn't really get into the nitty gritty, and we don't really need to know those things, but I'm assuming that Bran, first of his name, Bran the Broken, will be king until he dies, and then they will choose another one. And so I guess they did that so that like no one family rules the kingdoms. And I think that idea is a good start. I know a lot of people are disappointed that Jon didn't become king, but Jon killed Daenerys and made the ultimate sacrifice, killed the woman he loved because he saw that she was, going crazy. She was becoming evil and she was delusional. So he ultimately made the sacrifice and saved everybody, whether they crown him king or not. And again, he never really wanted it, and so he's abandoning the Night's Watch position he was handed and going to live with wildlings. At least that's what it looks like. So, he's going to live his best life out there in the true north, so good for him. And hey, he gave Ghost some pets. That good boy finally got some pets. You can't really complain after the good boy got some pets. And yeah, I didn't have a problem with Bran becoming the king. A lot of people are like, oh, he hasn't had a personality since like season 6 or whatever, but yeah, he's the three-eyed raven. He is he's exactly what the king needs to be, impartial and not, just like power. He is, and he says, why do you think I came all this way? Of course, people are going to nitpick. They're going to be like, oh, well, if he knew he was going to be king the whole time, why didn't he tell Jon that, why did he tell Jon that he was the true heir? And why was he building up the Targaryen thing? He did it to pit Daenerys and Jon against each other so that the outcome was exactly how it happened. He knew it the whole time. You could, some people said, like, oh, doesn't that make Bran, like, evil then? If he no, like, that's just what needed to happen. If Jon didn't know that he was a Targaryen and didn't have that kind of like, ooh, she shouldn't be queen kind of thing, he might not have killed her and the kingdom could be destroyed. Who knows? But Bran had a plan. And ultimately he became the king. I really liked Tyrion in this episode. I thought that Peter Dinklage gave another Emmy award-winning performance, and he probably will win another Emmy. And just like his whole trial and the talking about it and what to do with him and everything. And I thought it was interesting that when Jon killed Daenerys, that it wasn't just like fun and happiness back to the land. Like the Unsullied, her soldiers and the Dothraki, they still ruled the territory because they were her men. So it was like they were the ones kind of like leading this trial and everything, and they arrested Jon for killing Daenerys, and it was very interesting. I thought that for some reason that would play out a little bit differently, but I was surprised, and I thought it was fine that the way that happened. But that scene where Tyrion is talking to everybody and they decide on Bran becoming king, I really liked that scene. And of course the small council room scene where Tyrion is now the hand of the king to Bran, and he's got his small council with Brienne and Sam, who writes A Song of Ice and Fire and puts it on the table. Hilarious. And I'm trying to remember who else. There's Davos is there, and Bronn is on the council for some reason. I guess he finally got his what he was promised. And I just like the bickering, the little childish bickering that goes back and forth between them is very funny on kind of deciding what to do now in King's Landing. It's like, I could watch another 5 seasons of just that. That was great. So again, I guess I did kind of just list off some of the pros and not the cons. That's okay. I'm not going to get into the cons. There are obvious problems with the episode, but you're going to hear them from 10,000 other people on the internet. Overall, I liked this episode. I thought it was a good series finale, again, for what the series had become. We could get into all kinds of philosophical garbage, down the road about, what should have been and whatever, but I think I was satisfied. I would give it a solid 8 out of 10. I'm going to rate this episode, and I feel like that's overall how I feel about the last 2 or 3 seasons is probably 8 out of 10, where I would give the first 4 or 5 seasons a solid 9 out of 10, if not a 10 out of 10. So yeah, the last couple seasons haven't been as good, but I still enjoyed them, and this series finale I thought was very satisfying. Alright guys, I think that's going to be it for this review. If you are watching this as I uploaded it, don't forget to check out the Rich Alvarez show later today. And, if you remember and you see that join button there, you can become a member of this channel now. If you liked Wake Up Jacks back when we had Wake Up Jacks is back for members only. You can catch it at 11 a.m. Pacific time this Wednesday and every Wednesday until we decide we don't want to do it anymore, but then we'll have to replace it with something else since you became a member. All right, guys, thank you very much. Bye-bye.